It really is great to see you all here at this coffee morning, especially if it's your first coffee morning. These happen pretty much every month, normally around about the first Thursday of the month, but Easter is a slightly different time. Normally very similar to today, time just to have coffee and the world's best cake. And often we'll have a visiting speaker or we'll interview somebody about their life story. But as this is the Easter one, just going to reflect a little bit on the significance of the Easter story, just for a short time. And it's my job to do that this morning. If you don't know me, I'm Colin Tamplin. I'm one of the organizing team that looks after these coffee mornings. Just going to read a short part of the Easter story. It's part of the Good Friday story, so this is just the crucifixion part. Of course, there's a whole resurrection part. We're not going to touch on that too much this morning, but just some words here that we read in Mark's Gospel about what happened on what we know as Good Friday. Okay? So at noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And at 3 p.m, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani." Jesus was an Aramaic speaker, and in this gospel his original words in Aramaic are recorded, and then we're told what that means, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of those standing near heard this, they said, "Listen, he's calling Elijah." Someone ran and filled a sponge with wine vinegar, put it on a staff, and offered it to Jesus to drink. "Now leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down," he said. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last. The curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom, and when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, "Surely this man was the Son of God." Two apologies. First of all, I spoke at last year's Easter coffee morning, and so I hope you'll forgive this overdose of me. The second thing, I'm going to speak this morning again a little bit about me, just a little bit autobiographical. Last coffee morning I did that as well. I spoke briefly about my upbringing in South America, and especially on my various journeys as a child through the Panama Canal. If you want to know how that can possibly relate to Easter, it's all on YouTube. You can just type Moneyhall Church and Colin Tamplin, and you'll be thrilled with what you hear, I'm sure. But this morning, just a little bit more recent autobiography. A lot of you know my more recent story. Back in about 2015, I was happily going on about my business as the pastor of the church here, as it happened, and my wife received a very devastating health diagnosis, a condition called multiple system atrophy, which nobody has ever heard of, very, very similar to motor neurone disease. It's life-limiting, it's a degenerating disease, a neurological disorder. And soon after that diagnosis, as her condition progressed, I stepped down from my role as a minister here and gave my time in caring for her, for Haley, until just last November when she passed away. It's obviously a very challenging decade. There's lots I could share about that, and I've done so on different occasions. But of course, it's also been a very strange few months since, as I've been slowly starting the process of adjusting to life on my own. I'm not the only one here who's had to do that in recent days. And there's one aspect of that experience that I want to reflect on this morning as a way just into one part of the Easter story. Because of the nature of Haley's condition, multiple system atrophy, we knew that our time together was going to be limited. All the research said that a person with MSA will pass away within 6 to 10 years of a diagnosis. And Haley actually went on for the full 10 years. So we knew there would be a time when I would be alone. And though we didn't go on about it, it's clearly something that we would speak about. Often with humor, of course, as you do. If I had some plan that she thought was a bit crazy, she'd say, "Do it when I'm gone." That was a standard. Or, of course, if I expressed any kind of irritation about anything she said, she'll say, "You'll miss me when I'm gone." You can imagine the thing. Often more seriously, of course, as we thought and sometimes wept about what the future could look like. Sometimes we just reflected quietly on our own. I know Haley did that, and I certainly did that. And I would think, what am I going to feel like when she's not with me anymore? 42 years, happy years that we had together. I wasn't too worried practically, because as a carer I've had to do more and more. I did at last learn how to operate a washing machine. I more or less learned how to cook to keep body and soul together. I even untangled Haley's remarkable financial management system. But I did wonder emotionally how I would be. Some things I got about right. I knew that deep down, of course, I would be devastated and often sad. I knew there would be some measure of relief. Haley's suffering by the end was very, very distressing to her, and of course I knew that there'd be some sense of relief to be relieved of the responsibility of caring for somebody who could do very, very little for themselves. There's one thing I absolutely didn't expect, and at times I've really battled with, and it's with deep-seated feelings of guilt. Feelings of guilt, not over any one specific thing as it happens, but just a heavy sense sometimes of, I didn't do enough. I didn't care enough. I wasn't supportive enough. Part of Haley's condition was very strange, and not many people would have realized it. There's a thing called the pseudo-bulbar affect. Has anybody heard of that? It's a condition often associated with neurological diseases where a person's expression of emotion is not matching what they're actually feeling. For a lot of people with MSA, and I think with multiple sclerosis and so on, it can expressed in crying all the time, even when deep down they're not sad. For Haley, it was laughing or smiling. Everybody loved Haley's smile all of her life. But sometimes near the end, that is not how she was feeling. And I keep going back and thinking, did I miss it? Did I misunderstand what she was saying and how she was feeling? And that sense of guilt can be very real. I found myself racking my brain to think through her last conscious day. All her end came very quickly in the end. Was I kind to her? Did I look after her? And I can sometimes be very troubled with this kind of guilt. Now you might say, Colin, does this really surprise you? Don't you know that this is what every bereaved person feels? You might be saying that yourself if you've lost somebody, and you know what it's like to battle with feelings of guilt. Well, maybe in theory I did know it. I guess I just didn't kind of think it would affect me particularly. As far as I'd know, I'd done everything I could to care. I tried to be the best carer I could. I didn't think that these feelings would come to me, but I have felt it deeply. And I still sometimes do. I feel kind of overwhelmed by things that I may or may not have got wrong. And the question is, how have I dealt with these feelings of guilt? Actually, it's not just a question for bereaved people, is it? All of us in life know what it's like to feel guilty. Every one of us can look back on our lives, I'm sure, and we think of things we have said or done, or not said or not done, and the feelings of guilt can be very, very real. I think psychiatrists and psychologists will tell us it's one of the big factors in the poor mental health of many people is unresolved guilt over things to do with the past. How do we deal with it? How have I tried to deal with it? It's a massive subject, and all of our circumstances are so very different. There are practical things sometimes we have to do when we feel guilty, aren't there? Maybe there are things that we do have to go and resolve with a person or a situation and face up to things that we need to. There's all kinds of help from counseling and so on that will be good for us. But you know what's helped me more than anything else, I realize? It comes down to one word, and it's Easter. And it's Easter. Well, I've been tempted with desperate feelings about guilt, there's one thing I can go back to, and that is the Easter story. And particularly I found it condensed in this passage that we read together. There are this story of Jesus on the cross. And there are three things that happen, three sort of signs here that happen. And each of them, to me, give a wonderful way of approaching and dealing with guilt, whether real guilt or feelings of guilt. In that story, we read about a supernatural darkness. As Jesus is dying on the cross at noon, darkness came over the whole land for 3 hours. Then Jesus cries out from the cross. At 3 p.m, Jesus cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And then there's the tearing of the temple curtain. With a loud cry, Jesus breathed his last, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. As I explain these, I hope you see why these have been an enormous help to me in times when I felt a bit overwhelmed by feelings of guilt. That darkness reminds me that, in fact, I've been even more guilty than I realize. I've been even more guilty. It's a pretty awful start, isn't it? I'm wanting to talk about being relieved from guilt, and now talking about being reminded that I've got even more guilt than I realize. But think about it like this. Sometimes you've got to be told things are worse before you can make them better. I don't know if you've noticed, as I've been wandering around, I've got a limp at the moment. Do you notice? Maybe not. I have. And about 6 or so weeks ago, I had pain in my heel. And I thought, I've stepped on a stone or I've done something or other, but it persisted. So I went off to the physio at the GP. What's the pain like, Mr. Tamplin? Well, when I get out of bed and I step down, there's pain. I know what that is, she says. Anybody else know? Lots of people have had it. Yeah, there we go. Plantar fasciitis. Oh man, even sounds horrible, doesn't it? But it's a problem with your sort of plantar fascia ligament in the bottom of your foot. So she said, you've got to deal with this, gave me a set of exercises, which I realized go on for 20 weeks. So nobody's expecting this to be dealt with very quick. But I'm rather glad. I'm glad that I didn't press on with thinking it's just a little bruise and it's something I've got to deal with, which is also why I'm wearing these silly trainers. I would normally respect you more than to put on trainers with red soles, but they're the only shoes I'm comfortable in. It isn't a midlife crisis that I'm having, I can assure you. But see, I need to realize that with regard to my own guilt. There's a sense in which it's worse than I've realized. What's that darkness all about as Jesus died? It's God speaking. And it's God pronouncing his verdict on what is happening. Here is his own son, Jesus, an innocent man who is being put to death wickedly on a cross. The darkness is God saying, you are under my judgment. And the Bible says that all of us, left to ourselves, are under that darkness. That darkness that Jesus expressed when Jesus died symbolizes the problem we all have. None of us were there when Jesus was crucified. None of us were personally responsible for doing that terrible thing. The Bible would say, effectively, we've all said no to God. And we've said no to Jesus. And we've wanted to live our own way. So not literally putting Jesus on a cross, but saying no to all that he's done for us. And we come under that darkness of God. Do you know that's really important? Because it's as though God is saying, Colin, you may or may not have reasons to feel guilty about Haley, but you know that there is a deeper guilt that you have had that has had to be dealt with. Now, if we finish there, it could fill me with despair, of course. But it doesn't finish there, because there's a second sign, isn't there, on the cross as you see it there. The darkness tells me about how deep my guilt is, but Jesus' cry tells me that all of that guilt, whatever it is, has actually been taken away by Jesus. Whether it's ways I might have failed Haley, or the ways I've certainly failed God, Jesus has dealt with it all. Very strange thing, this cry of Jesus when he says, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" If the darkness there when Jesus died is all about God's judgment, there should have been one place, shouldn't there, of blazing light. And that's around Jesus. Jesus had never offended God. He'd never sinned, never turned his back on God. He lived in perfect obedience to God. There should have been like a big bright light, shouldn't there, in the middle of that darkness, saying, "Yes, you're under my judgment, but not my son. He's lived in perfect relationship with me." Well, not only was there darkness, what does Jesus cry? "My God, why have you forsaken me?" What on earth is happening there? The Bible's very clear. Jesus is not dying on the cross for anything he had done wrong. He was perfectly innocent. He is there in our place. He is there as a substitute for us. He had no guilt, but he's taking judgment for us. This is God's great gift. At the same time, God says, "You're under my judgment for rejecting me." God says, but I've given you the way out. My own son, who will take all the darkness and all the separation you deserve, it has come on him. We deserve God's judgment, but he sends his own son who takes judgment for us. Several hundred years before Jesus came, his coming was prophesied, and what he was due was prophesied. And this is the way the prophet Isaiah put it. "But he," that's speaking of Jesus, "he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to his own way. But the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all." It's the very, very heart of the Christian message. Can you see what that means to me at times when I'm feeling guilty? I can sometimes certainly find things that I am guilty of, that I did do wrong, but unfortunately I can't do anything about them now. Haley's not there for me to say, "Haley, I'm so sorry, let me make it up for you. It's just wrong that I did." But you know, I can look to the cross of Jesus. Do you know Jesus has paid for it? All my sin, all my failure, all the ways I've got it wrong, Jesus has taken that on himself. I wonder if you need to know that this morning, because guilt is really getting you down and you don't know what to do about it. I say there might be some practical things you need to do about it, but there might be things that you know you can never put right, you can never undo. I want you to understand that there is somebody you can trust who has gone into the darkness, who's been forsaken by God, so you never have to be. And then the last thing here is the torn curtain. And that reminds me that I can now live forever in the joyful presence of God. Historically, we know pretty much what it was where Jesus was crucified, we think. And only a few hundred meters from where this happened was a massive building. It was the Jewish temple, built way back there by King Herod. It was the most holy place for the Jewish people, where they went to worship. Right at the center of it, that large standing building in the center, inside that there was an area. It's called the most holy place. It's where the people believed that's where God could be met. Nobody could go in there. Only the leading priest once a year could go in there to seek forgiveness from the people. But other than that, sealed off. There was a curtain that was 18 meters high. Don't know, how high is the roof of this? It was big, about 9 meters wide, about 4 inches thick. Imagine having to wash that thing. And it was there. And it was the big no entry sign. God is too holy. God is too pure. Nobody can just wander in here. And when Jesus breathes his last, what do we hear? What do we read? That curtain, another sign from God, was torn in half. From top to bottom, so everybody knew God had did this. And what was it saying? Welcome. Not no entry anymore, but welcome. My son has died. He's paid the price for sin. The way into my presence is fully open. And you see, that's the final answer to times when I feel guilt. Nothing makes me more despondent, actually, than those times, more frustrated, more sad. Nothing makes me feel further from God than those times when I think of all the ways that I could and probably did fail. But here I'm assured that because of Jesus, not only has my guilt been taken away, but God welcomes me. And that can never, ever change. I don't know how much of any of that resonates with you this morning. Maybe you've never heard this stuff before. Maybe you're familiar with the story but not quite realized its implications. Maybe you're not really struggling with the great issues of guilt here today. But maybe you are. And if you are, one word, Easter. Easter will tell you a harsh truth about yourself. You are more guilty than you realize because of a broken relationship with God. But the news is better than you can imagine. Jesus has taken the darkness and the separation, and as we repent and confess, tell God we're sorry for what we've done, his forgiveness becomes ours. And the result is we are welcomed into the intimate presence of God. Our lives can be lived knowing God's grace and God's forgiveness every day.